The journal is the official journal of the International Society for Third Sector Research. As you can see, there are 3 of us editors-in-chief. The reason for this is because we really do receive a lot of manuscripts and we pay attention to each of them. Voluntas is an interdisciplinary journal, which does not mean that we only accept papers in interdisciplinary papers. It means that we accept papers irrespective of the discipline. However, the condition is that those manuscripts should be dealing with civil society, non-government organizations, non-profits, volunteer organizations. I'm saying this because many scholars from our part of the world very often send their papers to area studies journals, for example, that have to do with post-socialism, post-communism. So that would be an important differentiation for you, because I understand that you're not here to learn only about Voluntas. However, on the example of Voluntas, you'll be able to have a better idea how to choose a journal and which journal to approach. So there are also journals that are in particular disciplines like political studies only. However, with Voluntas, it is a field journal that is interdisciplinary, and we accept full-length articles and book reviews, which is important as well information, because there are journals, for example, that also accept research notes. Just very quickly, just to show off a little bit, our impact factor has been steadily growing, both the 1-year and the 5-year impact factor. We are very much committed as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion go. As you can see, women are very well represented, and also more than 15 countries are on our editorial board. We publish also special issues, and we are just now kicking off with virtual issues as well. As far as numbers go, we have received manuscripts from what counts actually is the country from where authors where their institutional affiliation is with. So this is not the ethnicity of the author. This is much more difficult to establish, as you are certainly aware. These are the countries of the institutions they represent. You can see here that we keep receiving more than 400 submissions per year. The acceptance rate is more or less steady. We're working hard as far as the time to first decision go, and you can see that now it is at about 50-something days. When I said that we're interdisciplinary, you can see here that although most submissions are from sociology, however, there are very many different disciplines that we accept manuscripts from. You have to believe me on my word that Voluntas is a very impactful journal. As you can see, our citations are growing. We just do not have yet the full statistics regarding 2022. That's why this table looks the way it looks. However, as you can see, the progress is there. And our site score accordingly is also improving. And now I've come to the part which I know that you came for to hear. So this would be the do's and don'ts that are based on my experience as an editor-in-chief for 2nd year now, but also prior to that, I have been on the editorial board of that journal for 6 years. And I have also served as a reviewer for many years for various journals, not only for Voluntas. So if I'm to advise you what you need to do to get yourself published to an international journal, one of my advices would be to sign up as a reviewer for a journal of your choice. It does not need to be one particular journal. You can give it a try for several journals. Anyway, always make sure to provide keywords for the editors-in-chief when they register you. This way, you'll be sure to receive submissions to review that are akin to your interests. And this way, you also see when you submit your papers, what kind of aspects reviewers are going to look into when assessing your submission. Make sure your submission is a full-fledged academic paper and not research note, report, evaluation. So as I said, there are journals that do accept research notes as well. However, just double check the journal if it accepts research notes, because, for example, when we receive research notes at Voluntas, we do have to desk reject them. It doesn't matter if they're excellent research notes or not. And now there is this proclivity which I have seen not only regarding submissions, but also in PhD projects as well. Do not assume that if you have a report or evaluation you have written for an NGO, you can just copy paste it and try to sell it as an academic paper. I mean, it is excellent to capitalize on your work, and you can very well use the research that was done, for example, during your work for an NGO, but don't try to use a report or an evaluation as an academic work, because it will not work. If you submit a paper to a thematic journal like Voluntas, double check if your manuscript is good enough fit for this journal, because you might submit an excellent paper that has nothing to do with civil society and we'll desk reject it because it will be poor fit or non-existent fit for our journal. Familiarize yourself with the relevant literature in your research field. This may look so self-obvious until you start working as an editor-in-chief and you start receiving research papers from all over the world. Continuously hone your academic English language skills. This refers to native speakers and to non-native speakers, but of course, mostly to us non-native speakers. This is a process that obviously never ends throughout our lives. Prior to submission, double check your manuscript for typos, language issues, missing references, etc. It really looks bad if you haven't done your homework, if you haven't read through your paper. And interestingly enough, I have noticed that this is an issue that often appears when there are several authors. Somehow, the higher the number of authors, the bigger proclivity that you have some, I don't know who checks things at the end, but somehow, no matter if you're a single author or not, make sure to double check I know there comes a moment when you can't, as an author, you can't look at your text anymore, you don't see anything there because you're so fed up with it, but you have to double check or ask a friend to check for typos or language issues, repetitions, etc. Learn from reviews, no matter whether your paper is going to be processed further or it has been rejected either by desk rejected by editors or by reviewers. Don't take personally critical comments. I know it's not easy, but you have to learn to do this, as those comments refer to your paper, that particular work, and not to you as a person, as an academic. So try to be constructive and learn as much as you can and use it afterwards when you decide to submit your paper elsewhere, because that's what everybody does. If you want a particular reviewer to not be invited, well, because as anyway, or in any communities, also in the academic communities, there are some animosities sometimes. Make sure to state this in the letter accompanying your submission. Another list of those. Access and read papers published in the journal of your choice and ask yourself the question, does my paper compare favorably to those published in that journal? Just be honest with yourself. Is my paper at that level yet? If so, perfect. If not, work on it. Does your paper include all necessary elements an academic paper should have? No, it's not evident. That's why I have listed it here, like title, abstract, keywords, words number. Always make sure that your submission to a particular journal is less than the required word number, because different journals have different requirements in this respect. For example, Voluntas is not too generous. We cannot accept more than 8,000 words, although this is a lot, I would say, but I know there are also journals that accept more than 8,000 words. Introduction, yes, there should be an introduction, method section, results, discussion, conclusion. And also just always double check with the submission guidelines of the journal. When justifying the need for conducting research, Do not just say there is a gap in the literature. We don't buy this. Also, that's good advice. I mean, it's not obligatory, but that's my good advice. Try to think about a positive explanation. How would your research actually advance the field? When rejected or desk rejected, make as much use as you can from any feedback you receive during the review process, and look for an alternative place for publication, which means do not try to resubmit unless you're explicitly said you can do so. And now a list of don'ts. Do not accost an editor-in-chief with requests for review prior to submission. Such practice would clearly constitute a conflict of interest. I'm saying this because this has been happening to me. So I mean, no, we don't do this. Don't submit your manuscript to more than one outlet at the same time. Even if initially given a green light, meaning major minor review recommendation, do not assume your revised manuscript, which you submit afterwards, will eventually be published if you do not engage constructively with reviewers or editors-in-chief's criticisms. Some authors make this mistake, they assume, oh, I received, even if there are major revisions, I'm there. No, you're not. If you do not engage constructively with reviewers' comments and with reviewers themselves, well, you're not yet there. Do not suggest potential reviewers except when the editors-in-chief request it when submitting your paper. Avoid framing the title of your manuscript as a question mark. Do not assume editors-in-chief will not find experts in your field or country. No, even if you submit to an international journal. Do not resubmit rejected manuscripts to the same journal. I just mentioned this. And here is a link to a very useful resource. It is on Springer Nature. However, I'm confident it could be of use no matter which publisher the journal of your choice would be. So you can access it and look through it and use it to create your manuscript. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Okay, so I would like to thank you to Galia for her presentation, because in fact, it was exhaustive. It was exhaustive, and I will try to concentrate on some comments, some improvements here. But let me start from my journal. My journal is Studia Logica. It is concerned logic, it is concerned mathematics. I think none of you will ever submit paper here because it's a little bit far from a typical philosophical paper and any sociological paper, with some exceptions. For this reason, I will not give a presentation of the scope, etc. It makes no sense. Let me tell, however, this is a journal which is, this year, it is anniversary, 70th anniversary of this journal. It was created in 1953 by Kazimierz Ajdukiewicz in Poland. It has long history. Now it is owned, title is owned by Institute of Philosophy and Sociology, and journal is published by Springer. Journal is published by Springer. I will not show you all confidential report of publisher report. It makes no sense. This journal is a rather narrow scope with rather narrow public, but it is one of the most important journals in this field. The structure is that there is a chairman, there is an editor-in-chief. I'm editor-in-chief of the journal. And let me not read everything here. Most important persons are managing editors. 5 of them plus me, so 6 of us. And when authors submit paper, he has a liberty to select one of us who will handle this paper. I think this is common for many journals. And just let me tell the story in the broader sense. It is kind of comment to what Galia said. Usually, from many years, in fact, from many years, authors who submit papers use internet for that, online system. There are many systems. I think most common is a system owned by Elsevier. Elsevier is biggest journal publisher, and second biggest journal publisher is Springer Business and Media. And Springer used the same system, editorial manager. Of course, there are other systems. They are similar in many aspects. Perhaps there are differences. I don't know them. I don't know more details about it. Let me tell you about just this system, how it does works. So first, if you log in, you can select journal where you will submit your paper, and then you select an editor who will handle your paper. Handle means here that he will select editors, he will read their reports, and they take the decision, perhaps find another referees if those referees decline or send something not good enough. Anyway, handle editors is the person you should contact in any problems. Problems happens everywhere, so may happen, not all the time, but from time to time. And first, what I would like to tell to authors, don't hesitate to write to editor. Just write to editor because it takes too long for you. You think it happens. You must remember that editors has really editorial work is harder and harder because there are more and more papers, and a number of potential referees is stable. So often I have to ask 10 people, 10 referees, until somebody will say me positive answer. So it happens that, of course, there is average time to first decision, 100 days or so. Of course, yes, but it happens that it is not 100, but 500 days in some cases, not because editor is lazy, but because it is hard to find a referee. And don't be afraid to ask editor why it is so long. For me, I like it very much when author writes to me and complain. My paper, it took so long. I have argument then to write to referee. Look, authors complain. So first, I think each author should consider himself as a kind of customer who go to shop and want to buy something. You expect something from them. Of course, you should be polite, etc., etc. That's obvious, right? But don't be afraid that, oh, I'm a student, I'm so stupid. So no, you are even the most greatest scientist. In some moment, submit his first paper, remember, and he was student that time. So, of course, there is a lot of things in Galia presentation, what paper should contain, etc. But most important thing is that quite often people who submit good papers are not assertive enough. So this is my first instruction, first thing I would like to tell you. Of course, some other things to complete. Well, let me come to other things for the moment. This is smaller. Some more thing about Studia Logica. It will be not so nicely ordered like the Galia presentation, but I believe you will find something here. So journal scope is important thing. Of course, I'm afraid this journal scope is not for you. But anyway, not because you are not good enough, but it's simply your discipline is a little bit, it's not quite close to it. We publish papers on logical systems, on non-classical logical systems, papers related to some systems of artificial intelligence, just systems of reasoning, systems which formalize reasoning. Papers here are mathematical, and mathematical methods is important. If I advise authors to submit papers to my journal, I tell them, paper must be focused on a concrete thing, concrete aim, to prove something, to show that something is such and such, or it's not such and such, okay? Just a paper which presents some not clear considerations is not a paper for journal, it's rather a starting point for a book. What is quite different thing, how to publish book. We have a very extensive editorial board because the journal has a very long tradition, and the board of managing editors, those guys are most important because they handle papers. They undertake the decision, and well, formally I confirm that decision, but I never change it unless there is an evident mistake somewhere. For example, this is not the report on this paper or so. We have also book reviews, etc. This is our metrics. Our impact factor is, you can see, is much smaller than impact factor of Galia's journal. This is just because this is narrow discipline, and there is not so many readers, not so many authors.
The two previous speakers have done a fantastic job of introducing the most important perspectives of editors of different journals. So I really enjoyed Galia's presentation and Jacek's as well. My own add-on probably will be just trying to fill in the gaps and show a slightly different perspective of a psychologist who also works across different fields. So my own work and our lab's work actually jumps across a lot of fields of medicine, pediatrics, recently, I don't know, physiotherapy people, speech and language therapist, developmental psychologist, brain research. So what I've learned in the course of my own career is that there's always a journal which you can find that will fit your work. You just need to look for it. So we often get to, or we get married to the idea that there are these three most important journals in our discipline, and this is where we should go every time. Whereas often the problem with a main so-called discipline journals is that they have a very narrow set of ideas about approach to research, and there are, you know, as in every field of life, actually, there are fashions and moods and preferences, and those fashions tend to change. So it may be the case that our research is so innovative and has such new bright ideas or a different approach that it will take another 5 years for that particular favorite journal to actually see that this is a valid approach. So I think what you need to do often is to be very careful in considering what you do and where it situates, and try to look for journals outside the box of your discipline and your preference, because often it may turn out that what you're doing is actually very much interesting to people outside your discipline and outside the field. So my first do would be to often try to consider a broader variety of journals and to understand, using a lot of Galia's points, trying to understand which journal would be good for that particular submission. So the thing that hasn't been covered before is considering a little more how to approach editors. So some so-called high-impact journals will explicitly say that they want you to inquire with the editor first whether this is going to be a suitable publication for them, so-called pre-submission inquiry. So some of the journals which are really considering themselves sort of high impact, broader journals will actually expect you to write to the editor prior to the submission to us. And for this, you need to write a very short, kind of an abstract, extended abstract sometimes, outline of what this paper is about. But you need to focus on really convincing the editor first that this is important enough, important for a broader readership, it's not too technical, and then obviously a full paper needs to follow if they say yes, which will actually fit those criteria. So for some non-discipline but kind of broader readership journals, you have to consider, and that's my important do here, how to place what you do in a broader context of work. Okay, so trying to explain why what you're doing with your particular methods is actually worth reading by a much broader number of people in different disciplines. Okay, so how can you actually show that your work generalized to other fields, or that it's demonstrating a broader, important phenomenon which will be useful and interesting to people across disciplines. So a lot of then thinking, if you're trying to write this sort of high impact papers, is going into trying to use much broader terms, much less technical papers, which still actually present the research that you did and provide a strong enough justification for what you're doing. And that's a tall order, but I think it's important to start to learn these skills for your future work, because a lot of good papers that are often cited are actually easy to read, even if they have a lot of technicalities. So it's good to include in your skill set the ways to rephrase what you're doing in more general terms, or learning how to explain to a non-expert what you're doing, because you can use these in your papers. Okay, the third thing I wanted to say, also regarding, in relation to my predecessors have said, is that different journals have different styles of editorial work. Okay, so we've heard from the editor saying that broadly the editors go with the reviewer's suggestions. And do you want to add something? So I'll finish and maybe you can comment on that. I know journals which actually do not just follow the reviewer's comments. They make an informed decision on the basis of reviews, but it's the editor's decision. So you might not know how this works in a particular journal, but you have to be aware of the fact that there's a number of factors that are important and play a role in an editorial decision about your paper, whether to accept it or reject. Okay.
What does it mean that don't follow?
Well, it means that you may have disciplines where there's so much infighting, okay, that the editor needs to actually have a critical read of the review, because the review may have certain biases. Okay, so I know journals which will expect that they consider themselves so important that they will expect 4-star reviews from all editors, from all reviewers, and there could be 4 reviewers, and they all need to be super positive about the eventual thing. So if there's a lot of people who have very conflicting views in a discipline, you never get 4 people as reviewers to agree.
I would not stress the difference, because I said exactly the same.
Yeah.
Simply, editor has his own mind and expertise.
Yeah, but
based of reference, he undertake decision.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that there are editors that play safe, here. So they just go with what they've been given, and there are editors who actually do their own thinking on the basis of reviews. And I would stress that different journals work in different ways, because you have to understand it's a complex process.
Yes, it is a complex process. It's not only the reports, but also who write this report. This is important.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know whether there's a do, but probably the do is don't get upset about rejections, because it's a complex process and you may not understand all of the factors. Some of them will be perhaps the fact that your journal is considering itself a very high impact. So if your work is not general or so important across disciplines enough, they will just reject it on that basis. You know, it may happen in some journals. Okay. Now, I want to say that am I running out of time? Is anything? I'm good. Okay. So a couple of don'ts that I wanna stress, also in relation to what my predecessor said. I would go even further in saying be polite than just being polite to your reviewers. I will actually repeat what my PhD supervisor, who was a long-time editor of a good journal, Developmental Science, for a decade, he always said that you should appease your reviewers. Okay, so going as far as appeasing people who are reviewing your paper, remembering that, well, they are now in a position to decide whether this work actually goes through or not. So a do that is important in your career is learning how to rephrase your anger into very polite language. That will actually, if you want to say that the reviewer's comment is idiotic, which may happen from your point of view, that's fine. But it's always good to actually try to rephrase and rephrase and rephrase to the point that it actually becomes polite as language, you know, can go, and that it actually stresses the exact detailed point that you want to make. Okay, so actually trying to explain why that particular comment may not work or is just not useful. It's sometimes difficult, but I think it's important to learn the skill of actually trying to polish your language in your replies as much as possible. My don't would be, don't go too long in your replies to reviewers' comments, okay? Sometimes we have this tendency to be over-detailed and over-exaggerated, and it just gets too tedious for reviewers to read, okay? So it's good not to go too long in your replies to comments. I have to say, as a reviewer, because I do a lot of work, I often see that people try to hide certain things in the work, and there's a delicate balance of trying to not over-advertise the weaknesses of your work, which they're always there, you know, so at the same time as not trying to hide them completely. Okay, so in your papers, it's very important to sort of strike a good balance of being honest about limitations and shortcomings of your work, but at the same time not letting yourself down and showing that, well, all of this is nonsense because there are so many limitations. Okay, we sometimes tend to either be over positive about what we've done, kind of negating the fact that there are shortcomings. Sometimes I see the opposite in papers, so people tend to kind of have a long list of limitations in the discussion, after which one may conclude that it's actually rubbish, you know, so it should be published. So it's important to work on trying to sell your work as a valid piece of information, as a valid achievement, at the same time as trying to stay on the honest side about what are the limitations and shortcomings. And that's also a difficult thing that I think people learn a lot.